Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and I am here today joined by by the brother of my brother from another mother, Ryan E. Roach. Ryan, what's going on?
What the hell are you talking about?
Brian is under the weather. He sounds like an alias of himself. It doesn't sound like the same person, but that actually is Brian and not some doppelganger or Eeyore, as you actually sound like. You sound like Eeyore today, man. You feeling all right over there, Brian?
Thanks for noticing me.
That's about the perfect. That's the best impression you're probably going to ever do, and it's not even intentional. But you're going to struggle through it. Did the game make you sick? Is that what the problem was?
Nah, man, I've had this cough in my chest for about a week and a half, and it just got worse over the weekend.
Man, I'll tell you that. Well, it's fortunate you weren't out in the weather. It wasn't actually too terrible in Pittsburgh last night, other than having to deal with the Bills Mafia, the Bills fans that came out there. I mean, they came out, they supported their team. Great for them, but they were an annoying group. And I am going to start this show off with this in case any of them are listening. If you were there in Pittsburgh and didn't pick up any of your trash, I mean, I understand there's been a certain crowd that comes to these Kenny Chesney concerts at Heinz Field in the summer, and they have trashed the city too. But in probably a decade of tailgating, consistently tailgating down there in Pittsburgh, I mean, I bring a rig, my cousin comes down, we have 2 cars, we have tents, we have tables, we have everything. I've never actually witnessed a couple of things as I did last night. The first was a guy actually pushing around kind of a dumpster and picking up things as the tailgating went on. And when I came back to that lot, even when I left, crushed beer cans, like people just left their trash all over the place, man. Empty beer case, cardboard things, everything like that. And I know that's a way to, I'm starting off the show already salty because the Steelers lose, but let me intimate that, I'm going to talk about I don't even know what I want to say, disappointed in the game. This is about what I didn't expect or feel entitled to a Steelers win. If they would have won, I would have been like, okay, but this is kind of the way that we both thought this game was going to be, a defensive struggle, time position type battle, et cetera, et cetera. But just the way that some of the Bills fans act like you've been there before, man. Clean up after yourself. You were a bunch of pigs in the tailgate lots if you were there. For the ones that it doesn't apply to, obviously, I don't want to label everyone, but everywhere where I was, this was a coordinated thing where they were there. I mean, these lots open at 5 hours before, Brian, and I was ready to roll. I'm down there 5 hours ahead of time, and they already had 3/4 of the one cash lot completely full. They had coordinated an invasion of Heinz Field for all of the people who were looking for extra Christmas money or whatever and sold off their tickets. They kind of sold out. They sold out to the Steelers, to the team. All these players were asking for a blackout with the color rush jerseys, right? And there were a lot of blue jerseys. There was actual crowd noise for the first time since the Cowboys came to town. And that was like 3 years ago or whatever. And I understand it's a short road trip for the Buffalo fans. I know some of these fans have already, the Steelers fans are like, well, they don't have Ben Roethlisberger. I'm done with this already. And they're, fire sailing their tickets. But man, it was really disappointing. And it was so bad that it made me want to shout. And this is to the Bills fans, too, because the damn Isley Brothers song that you wouldn't stop singing, they go, hey, let's go, Buffalo. I swear to God, I heard it for 10 hours straight yesterday. I really wish that the Steelers would have pulled out a victory just to shut them up, because I understand that they're all excited. They're going to go to the playoffs. I don't think that was ever really in jeopardy this year. They got a double-digit win season for the first time. When was it? It's been at least 20 years or something like that. So I get that they're excited, but man, these guys were acting like they just won the Super Bowl, and it's like you eked out a 7-point victory against an offense that's not very good, with a guy, what is this, Duck Hodges' fourth start ever, an undrafted quarterback who was a camp arm. He was supposed to be a camp body. And, you're running around town like ready to burn it down. And it's like, hey, guys, you know what? If you do that to New England next week and you win your division, then I get it. But I mean, to come to Heinz Field and just act like a bunch of jagoffs, it was pretty gross to me, and I never want to hear this Isley Brothers song again either.
It's funny that you have this take on your aggravation, because I was about to give the Bills fans, based on the commentary on our previous podcast, a lot of credit for being civil and logical and not overreacting and saying we were full of junk, and oh, there's no way, being overreactive towards their team. But hey, I guess the Bills version of Yinzers showed up at Heinz, and the logical ones showed up on YouTube. How strange! The internet is usually the opposite.
I don't know if it's like the Canadians or what they are from Buffalo. We call the Cincinnati people that's like they're from Northern Kentucky. I guess Buffalo is technically part of Canada, but the ones that were there, Yinzer's a good word for it, Brian, because I saw people picking fights. People provoking people, even in my own section. This stuff doesn't really go on like at Heinz Field. I understand people get drunk and things happen, but I mean, you've had these slugfests with like the Bengals, the Browns, and Ravens within the division, and I've never really see any animosity with that or with Patriots fans or whatever. Usually, everyone's pretty civil and cordial, and these people are getting in like people's faces, and I mean like older fans, like the ones that have been sitting in there for 30 years, right? And the aforementioned. But I mean, getting in people's faces when these people are not like, if there's like banter back and forth, let's say it's me and you and we're supporting different teams, and I'm like, I'm giving you a little bit and you're giving me back. Okay, yeah, that's cool. That's all in fun. But man, this was nasty. So I don't want to like really labor on this because there's a lot of other things to talk about here. But I had to put that out in front because it was just so annoying. And I mean, just to get an idea, if you weren't there, you may have been able to hear it a little bit, I don't know, on TV. Usually the crowd noise doesn't come in as much, as profound as you would hear in the stadium. But it's along the same lines as that stupid like little chant that the Ravens fans do too whenever something good happens. They got the oh, and I'm like, man, I hope the Steelers never do something like that. It's just, it was making me gag. I'll put it that way. But I mean, we had some fun with some of the fans. The guys that were tailgating right next to us. He said the greatest thing that is going to be the way that I felt about this game. He said, "You know what? Win or lose, it doesn't affect me. I'm going in. I'm here to have a good time, and I'm going to enjoy the game." He expected it to be a close game, just like me and you talked about. And I said, man, that's a great outlook for some fans. It's unfortunate he wasn't one of the guys sitting in our section. That was pretty annoying. But I digress. We have to move on to bigger and better things here, maybe. Let's get this right out the gate before we go into actual plays, because I think the biggest thing is the duck. I mean, that the duck that was thrown on our direction on Sunday night isn't the duck that we were used to. This is the duck that we were talking about. We were saying this. We were like, okay, there were a couple things we were maybe predicting. They were going to throw the ball, that he may throw like 25 passes or more, which he hadn't done in any game yet this season. And that could be a good or a bad thing. And it ended up being a bad thing because he's never thrown more than 21 in a game the entire time. And they're relying on this guy to throw 38 passes. And he dropped back more than 38 times because he was also sacked 4 times in this game. And I want to say even like he carried the ball. Yeah, he carried the ball once, which was not a designed run. So he's dropping back. We'll add another 5 to those 38 attempts. That's 43 times out of how many, let me see how many offensive plays the Steelers ran here. 59. What did I say? 43 out of 59 plays. Now, I know some people, we're going to talk about this in a second, whether or not he's still the quarterback here, but I think the main theme here is some people aren't really necessarily, they're not throwing him under the bus. Maybe they love the duck thing. Maybe they haven't grown tired of him like they did with Mason Rudolph yet, but he's at fault for what happens in this game. Of course, the Steelers, they give the ball away 5 times. You can't expect to beat anyone, let alone a team with a great defense that is, they're in contention to win their division. We'll speak about that with standings and the Steelers' playoff hopes too here in the same show. But I feel like the coaching staff is also to blame because don't put this guy in this position to drop back the pass 43 times against a team that essentially has as good of a defense as you do. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. I will say this. we've been talking about this kind of ad nauseum in the back rooms amongst all of ourselves. And, the truth of the matter is this team was originally built around Ben Roethlisberger and the idea that he was going to throw the ball 40 to 45 times a game. Mm-hmm. It was never designed to be the kind of offense that they absolutely need to be right now. And what people don't understand and what they have to get a handle on is it is not easy to change your entire offensive philosophy, on a moving train. It's not like they had the preseason to do this. It's not like they had a lot of time to come up with these things. And habits are hard to break. So, that's what this team has been. And at times they've lived in what they need to do and have tried to limit Duck's exposure or even Mason Rudolph's exposure. And what happened when that happened? The fans lost their minds and said, where's Ben Ball? When are we going to throw deep? But you can see why they had that philosophy, at least at one point. Now, as it relates to this specific game, you had James Conner. He ran a nice run to start the game. Their first drive was a nice breakaway. But I think that this team has a tendency, Fichtner, Tomlin, whoever is the one deciding these things, that if they don't consistently get chunk plays via the run, then they quit. They start throwing the ball. And they can't do that in the current incarnation that they're in. Now, I think the stats are out of proportion because by the time the last two series of the game were on, they needed chunk plays that they weren't going to get through the run, and they had to throw the ball more than they normally would. But that being said, they still got away from it way too early. You had five. As Aditi Kiki, whatever her name is, I can't know. I love her, but I can't pronounce her last name.
Kikawala.
Okay, whatever you just said.
Yeah,
but as she said, they had 900 running backs on the roster or whatever for this game, and they did not utilize. What was the point of having all these guys active if you're not going to utilize them the way that you potentially could? Which we will get into, I'm sure, as we further explore the mess of what the offensive side of this game was at times. They need to understand that their identity needs to be a control the ball offense that is not risky, that takes limited risks, and does not put their defense in positions that are unsuitable. That being said, the Bills only managed 3 points off of all those turnovers. Yeah. So, you have to realize, okay, that's good. The defense did their part to pick the offense up, but you can't, you cannot keep them on the field like they were. At one point, I know Zach and I were talking about this, and I know you probably were too at the game, that the time of possession was over 10 minutes in favor of the Bills at one point. Yes. It ended with nearly 5 minutes still. But that's with the Bills going into complete shutdown mode, running the ball and kicking it back and saying, go ahead and beat us.
Yeah.
We've talked about this ad nauseum. You cannot put the defense on the field for the vast majority of the game and expect that there are not going to be some breakdowns at some point. Oh,
absolutely. And I mean, when you look at some of these, here we go with some of the Steelers plays yesterday, okay? You had 7 plays for 28 yards. It ends in the interception on the first drive, which was essentially a punt. I wasn't even beat up over that, to be completely honest. It's like, if you're just going to punt the ball anyways, you take that deep shot there. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And not a big deal, right? I that's the way I feel with it. And I said that pretty much the same thing to the professor yesterday while we were sitting there watching the game. And I heard someone else say it on NFL radio this morning, and they elaborate a little more than what I did on it, to the X's and O's. But the field position game there, not a big deal. The Buffalo got the ball on their 25, you know what I mean? And then they only run 5 plays, and the Steelers' defense, stuffs them too. It was a defensive battle, and man, I'll tell you, the Steelers' defense, I think, did a tremendous job yesterday. But you look at these drives, 3 for 0 yards and a punt on their second possession, and that's the Jordan Berry punt that only went 22 yards. You see, this is, the Monday morning quarterback should be like Monday morning overreaction person, because there's people that are out there, oh, you know what, cut Jordan Berry. Why? He's had one of his best seasons. I mean, he follows that up, I think, with a 55-yard punt after that. Okay, he shanked one. He hasn't been kicking a cold rock all season yet. And I want to say the Buffalo guy, I forget his name now, also shanked one at some point, or didn't have a very good one. And that was toward the end of the game, too. That really gave the Steelers good field position and a chance still to win when we thought it was all over. The Steelers go 6 for 36 with a field goal, 3-0 with a punt, 2-0 with a fumble, and that ends the half. And I guess maybe we should go back to, they didn't really shoot themselves in the foot a whole lot, other than the turnovers, I'm going to say. Penalty-wise, it didn't seem that way. We'll get to a few where we could say, I know you're going to get your favorite catchphrase out. Yeah, but I mean, the first deep attempt on the 3rd and 15 from their 40, you're in a range where you can't really kick a field goal, and a punt there is kind of, it could go back for a touchback. So I didn't think that was the biggest deal in the world. And you had a 0-0 game at the end of the first half, or the first quarter, I should say. It starts out, Josh Allen gets sacked. They have an incomplete pass, and you're looking at 3rd and 18. Where Allen scrambles for 12 yards. He ends up being just barely down where Terrell Edmunds knocks the ball out. And it's 4th and 6, and Buffalo now is in the same kind of position, and they end up converting and getting a first down. And that was really a backbreaker there, because, if they bottle them up and it's, 3rd and or 4th and 10, I don't think Buffalo's going for it right there. I think they're probably going to pooch punt or something like that. They go for it, and this ends up being the touchdown drive at the very beginning of the second quarter, where Josh Allen sneaks in behind the left guard on a keeper. It was probably like one of the RPO type things, run pass option, where he kept it and just goes in there. And a lot of that's by design. Hearing from some of the Buffalo folks throughout the week, even since our podcast, and hearing some of the post game, most of the plays that are designed for the running back are also designed for Allen too, which is, pretty, I don't know, I'm not going to say it's unique to Buffalo, but it's something that they do, you know what I mean? Obviously Lamar Jackson does it too, so it's not unique to Buffalo. So 7-0, and now the Steelers end up, they get the ball, they have this drive, they answer, but it's only a field goal. And now Buffalo, it's going to be some more kind of back and forth here where, Buffalo gets the ball, they have a few plays, et cetera, et cetera. You get down to the play now with about just under 3 minutes left. Buffalo has the ball on their 32. Josh Allen attempts a deep pass for Cole Beasley. It's intercepted by Steven Nelson, who gets a decent return out of this for 33 yards. Kareth White ends up carrying the ball on the first play, takes us to the 2-minute warning with a face mask penalty that's enforced for 10 yards due to it being from the 20. It's half the distance to the goal. 2-minute warning, 1st and 10, Buffalo 10-yard line. Steelers look like, they're down 7-3. They're going to get some points before the end of the half, and they get the ball back to start the second half. Then this Wildcat nonsense, whatever the hell this was, ends up happening. And I mean, this is like, put the scarlet letter on all these guys here. I know our friend the professor is defending Pouncey a little bit here, but Pouncey's snaps, you heard me say this on the last show, and I maybe even went a little overboard, but I think now it's getting more attention because of this bad snap to Connor and the Wildcat. He lines up there, the timing is all a mess, and then he's trying to hand the ball off to a rookie wide receiver who then bobbles it himself. Statistically, the first snap is a fumble to Connor. Then it's another fumble. Buffalo gets the ball. They ran 2 plays, Brian. This Wildcat thing, then they cough up the ball. They get nothing out of Steven Nelson's interception here, and Buffalo essentially just kind of runs the ball and runs the clock out, and they go into the locker room. Just nonsense, man. It's driving me crazy. Go ahead.
To me, that's the turning point of this game.
Yep.
And it's simply because you go from having some kind of guaranteed points to getting nothing at all. There's no guarantee they would have gotten 7 and taken the lead. That they very well may have settled for 3, but 3 changes perspective in a lot of other ways as you move down into the game later. And what happens here is, yes, both Zach and I are on the same page. Pouncey's snap is bad, and he's had some issues with low snaps this season. No question about it. But is there a better center on the team? No, there's not. And it's not even close. B.J. Finney is a fine player, but he's not Marquise Pouncey.
Oh, let me interject there. If you took Pouncey from center, you're going to have him play guard. And they did that once, I want to say. Didn't they have Legursky or somebody?
They did sometime once.
Yeah, they did something like that. But he's still an athlete, and that was my thing where I came off of. Remember I said he's not a Pro Bowler this year. And then I came off of that a little bit because he's still an athlete. He still gets downfield, unlike other offensive linemen in the league can. And he's still elite at doing those things, but the snaps have been funky.
Agreed. But to place that fumble – and I'll talk about where it really belongs, but to place that fumble on Marquise Pouncey is not. You and I will agree to disagree on that, because while yes, it's not good, Connor has control of the ball. It's not like he was jostling it. And as Zach points out, he knows as a running back, if you have any question about ball security, you don't try to hand the ball off. And yet he does. And I think the handoff actually went fine. And then Deontay Johnson, who has been a fumble machine this season, he's got ball security issues that need to be addressed ASAP, flubs the ball. Now, all that being said, the blame can go all the way around and land where it probably belongs, which is on the head of one Randy Fichtner. That play should never have been called. It should never have been called. First of all, you've got a running back or a wide receiver who's not used to taking handoffs to begin with, who has questionable ball security, and you're going to give him the ball when you got 5 running backs whose job it is to take handoffs? I am so annoyed by that play, and I remain so annoyed by that play. And I will place it on the head of Randy Fichtner because it was a dumb designed play.
Yeah. Well,
it shouldn't have happened.
I mean, at the very least, even if you're going to play it safe, and I mean, this is going back to what Brian. Let's take this even further back. For longtime listeners of our show, they've heard this before. If you're new to this program, well, welcome and thanks for listening and supporting us at all. But we have said this how many times now? When the Steelers' backfield does not get 20 touches in a game, it doesn't matter usually if it's split up, but it's usually the primary back in most cases, meaning James Conner, if he's the one, or Bell, or whoever it be. When it's not 20 touches, they lose. It's just go back every single time. It's an L. Okay, they get 25. It's almost always a W. And they just abandoned this. I mean, that was the first play of the game. Let's get Connor started. I said, oh, look, this looks good. We were talking also about Benny Snell. Some Benny Snell football. He's a rhythm guy, man. He is violent. He runs with anger. But he's a guy that gets better as the game goes on. 2 carries. It's like, hey, how do you best help a guy that is an undrafted quarterback that this is probably the biggest game every game's the biggest game from here forward, obviously.
Absolutely.
But so how do you protect this guy? You know what I mean? We talk about offenses molding, and you make the great point of this was all designed for Big Ben. And when Big Ben went on the shelf in the second game, all of a sudden now, we gotta start moving things around. It looks like one of those what do you want to say, the crime scene things where you have the yarn and the push pins and all the photos and things up on the wall.
Yep.
Now you're starting to scramble and you're putting things and you're moving and you're connecting different dots because you got to work toward your second-year quarterback strengths in Mason Rudolph. Then all of a sudden he gets knocked out of a game. Now you got to go back to Duck. And then you have a bye week, and you get the guy out of concussion protocol. It's your second-year guy. Let's bring him back. And they're constantly juggling all of these plates, hoping to not let them crash and break on the ground with what to do with the quarterback. So I get what's going on with the OC here. That's a tough, tall task. And if you don't believe me, look at some other teams around there. Go look at the Detroit Lions, for example, and see what's going on. Go look at the Cincinnati Bengals and look what's going on with their quarterback situation. Then look at some other teams, too, that aren't doing so hot as maybe you would have thought. Browns. And, it's just, I get it. But you don't want this guy going back, dropping back like 40-some times, especially when the offensive line isn't protecting him. You don't have your primary tight end playing in order to block, so you got to rely on, you have Nick Vannett out there, and you got Zach Gentry, who, just think of Jesse James when it comes in terms of blocking, especially when he was earlier in his career. He got better, but he wasn't great at doing that. It wasn't his, his strong suit there. And Gentry's in that same kind of position. You have some plays where we were like, oh my God, did Matt Filer totally screw up there? No, they threw a DB blitz, and Filer's trying to block two people, and he does about as good as anybody can in that situation to try and stave them both off, and Duck ends up going down, and that ends up killing them later in the game too. Duck was just getting hit, and I think that's part of the problem. Is I want to say maybe that was even the first interception. I think that Phillips ended up hitting him, and the ball ends up short. He got baited maybe on a Tre'Davious White interception. And I'm not trying to make excuses. These are things that a good defense in Buffalo should do. Give Buffalo credit here. I'm not trying to take anything away from them by all means. But this is where, like you were saying, protect this guy, man. James Conner, you got to be smarter than that. Deontay Johnson, even if he does get the ball there, do we really think that he's going to score off of that play? I mean, he's not even really going off tackle. And that's a tall order. We saw Benny Snell kind of go into that same position, I want to say, off of the right guard right there and not get anything. And then you're not giving him any more carries throughout the game either. I really don't understand what it is that they were doing here with the running game. You have Connor with 8 carries for 42 yards. He had that was Aditi. Where was Aditi's? I had Aditi's tweet up. Hold on, she had the stats here too. First 2 of his first 6 carries, 15 and 17 yards. And then they didn't really do anything else because they just abandoned it. He only ended up with 42 yards. Kareth White had 2 carries for 5, and Benny Snell 1, and then 2 to Jalen Samuels. And it was sloppy. It was ugly. It could have and should have been much better than what it was. And you thought with having Connor back, okay, maybe he's on a pitch count. I get it. But you've been playing Snell a heck of a lot, and you're not even giving him the ball either. Kareth White is a change of pace guy, and they're not using him. They did not utilize these backs, and even throwing the ball to him. I understand that Connor, he caught 4 or 5 passes that went his way. Samuels was targeted just the once, so you only have 6 passes that go to these guys. This used to be the strength, and this is going to be the opponent coming up, and they were just talking about this Thursday night when the Jets were playing the Ravens. When Le'Veon Bell was with the Steelers, you're talking about him being the second best wide receiver on the team. That was the constant narrative. I understand that maybe James Conner or Jalen Samuels or these guys, maybe they do, maybe they don't have the same talent level of a Le'Veon Bell, but at least get them involved in the game in the same way. It's like they totally scrapped this idea so you don't run the ball. And then Randy Fichtner had been quoted as saying these short passes he views as a run play too, but those weren't really there outside of, I will say the one thing that they started doing, especially through the second half, that looked like it was working. When they were handing the ball off on like first down, it was going nowhere, Brian. They were they were loading up the box. It was going nowhere. So to get them out of the box, Devlin Hodges, great anticipation, quick, which makes it look like a quick release. These short little out passes, they were picking up 3-4 yards maybe on first down. So now it's like a 2nd and 6 or something where you can open up the playbook a little more and do a little more with your offense. I thought that was working really well, and there was only one that really got dropped. I think all of them were very successful, and you're picking up these little chunks, and if that's what you got to do and Dink and Dunk could go downfield, great, because that's what you got to do against these defense. Let Chris Boswell kick it, whatever be the case. If you end up getting those points at the end of the half, I think it's completely different for this game, because not only are the Steelers calling a different game, they may hand off the ball a little more if they have, let's say they come out in the second half and they still scored a touchdown, okay? What are you looking at there? 13-3? Then maybe they don't abandon the run. Maybe they're not throwing the ball as much. They eat up some clock to get some time of possession. Maybe they don't give it up. There isn't interceptions. Maybe Buffalo has to take a little more risks, which we've seen the Steelers defense create the splash plays. I think it's a completely different game. So for you to call that a turning point, I think is spot on when it comes to this game and how it shook out.
Absolutely. That's my point. You picked up on my point exactly. if you come out and you have the lead, look, Buffalo did exactly what we would do if we were in the lead. They shut down the risks on their offensive side to not allow, for the Steelers defense to make plays that would get them back in the game. And that's what we should do as well. If we got the lead, if we came out, we scored that touchdown and we're up by 3 points, it doesn't mean you can't still try and score, but your mentality is different. And now you're running the ball instead of throwing it as much. And if you have to punt, hey, guess what? Your defense is fantastic. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Plus, maybe, unless, Jordan Berry kicks the end of the ball to send it straight up in the air again, maybe you get them in a long field and you do put them in a situation where they're going to be as conservative as well. Maybe they're playing for a field goal to tie. But once they got a 7-point lead, they didn't have to worry about that. And, it put the Steelers in a bad situation, especially as the game started to dwindle on. You talked about Duck's performance and about the 4 interceptions. And I'll be fair and say that only one of them really bothers me.
Yeah, agreed.
Of the 3 other ones, which were all on deep passes, either 2 were in the end zone and the first one in the first half, which you equate to a punt. Look, I didn't think a couple of them were smart decisions, but they were also desperation heaves, and you just kind of hope something happens. But the one on the out pass that White picks off and takes back to the 18, that ball should just never have been thrown. That's the one play in there that's just a bad decision by Duck, and exposes him. You're talking about an elite corner playing at that level. Even with perfect ball placement, that ball should not have been thrown. Now, whether that's the play call and that's his first option, in which point I will say again that play probably shouldn't have been called. You're trying to protect this kid, and that's a risky throw. So, that's the one that bothers me out of all of the interceptions. The sacks, look, Duck's pocket presence is not as great as it could be. But again, and I tweeted this out, look, you've got a guy who was an undrafted free agent, cut from the squad at one point, we've said this repeatedly, ain't supposed to be here. At some point, he was going to have a clunker.
Yeah.
And hopefully he learns from it. Hopefully it's a tool for growth, and he could pick up on these things. I get it. The fan base, the nation has fallen in love with the story, with the nickname, with the duck calling. They've fallen in love with it, as we tend to do with some of our, second-tier players. But you got to remember that doesn't mean he's destined for a gold jacket. And just because we like the story and we love the underdog and we want him to succeed, this is still an undrafted rookie free agent who is not really prepped for what he's doing. And 3 weeks of starting and 3 weeks of getting the first team reps is not the same as a full off season, is not the same as a game plan that is originally built around you. They're still learning him. He's still learning them. It's going to be an evolution, and there's just no way around it. It was going to be that way. And this is the first truly elite defense he's faced. And, it's, again, there's a couple other things that I want to point out. One of the problems that I really have with this game is that in many ways, I think that they got blindsided by the way that the Bills were blitzing. Hodges said at the end of the game, they threw some blitzes at us that we weren't expecting. That's great coaching on the Bills side, right? And that sometimes happens. Look, but they should have understood a lot better, how to deal with this and made the right adjustments in the second half, because the running back protection was for crap. The offensive line was getting overwhelmed. I mean, remember, there's still only 5 of them, and when you're sending 7 guys, somebody's getting through.
Yeah.
And the Bills had a good game plan, and I think that that'll be exactly what you're going to see moving forward. They are going to put 7 or 8 guys in the box. They're going to load it up. and they're going to dare Duck to beat them with his arm moving forward. So it's going to be up to the Steelers and Fichtner and Tomlin and whoever else is going to be in that brain trust to figure out ways to loosen those things up without exposing Duck to undue risk. Because what you saw here is almost certainly what you're going to see against the Jets. The Jets are the number 3 rush defense in the league. They're not a great pass defense, but they're the number 3 rush defense. So to think you're going to be able to just run the ball because you've chosen to run the ball, they better have a good game plan for going against the Jets. And then, we'll see. We'll see what happens when we get to Baltimore and who's actually playing in that game. But, they got 2 games to go, and they kind of need to win them.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that momentarily. The second half of this game, starts out with the Steelers getting the ball, and as you alluded to, Deontay Johnson's Butterfingers almost foiling what ended up being a 29-yard pass right from the beginning. Yeah, he ends up fumbling at the tail end of that, gets it punched out from behind after making a guy miss and then stiff-arming someone. I mean, he's like one of the smaller guys on the field, and he stiff-armed, I forgot who it was, one of the DBs, and then there's a little bit of dink and dunk here for like 7 yards, and then 4 yards, and then you actually get Connor the ball. Think about this: 17 yards. So you have a very successful run rate here. Zach Banner comes in as eligible. Benny Snell loses a yard, and then this is when they decide to kind of almost bootleg it over to James Conner, and he walks it right in. And you're like, oh my goodness, this is starting to look like an offense. And then nothing else. Like literally nothing else the rest of the game as far as putting up any points for the Steelers. The Steelers defense gets it done on the very next series here. They make Devin Singletary look like Deontay Johnson. They were knocking the ball away from him constantly. Mike Hilton ends up recovering. TJ Watt is the one who knocks it out, further solidifying how the reasoning for him. He should be Defensive Player of the Year. You can't, I know some people are saying like Stephon Gilmore or something. Get out of here. You know what? Steven Nelson and Joe Hayden are having just as solid years there. So, screw that jazz. But you follow this up, and Hodges throws like a short little pass to Samuels here. Steelers have the ball on their 36, and then Hodges gets sacked and nearly loses the ball, recovered by Big Al, and then he gets sacked again, and they end up punting. They get moved back to their 25. Buffalo gets the ball at their 36, and now you're back to the defensive struggles here, because the Steelers practically force like a 3 and out here, and then they get the ball back. Then you have you have a few things going on here. Oh, where does this happen? This is what ends up happening. This is where I wanted to get to, Brian. This is the series now in the third quarter where he throws the Tre'Davious White pick that you were talking about, practically across the field, if I remember correctly. He was going across. It was practically on the left and then throws from the right. And he was getting flushed out of the pocket quite often. And I don't know that his awareness was where it needed to be in that game, and I think maybe that is because of on film, because even hearing some of the post-game stuff, I forgot who said it. Maybe it was Charlie Weiss that said it earlier this morning. He said it was like, or maybe it was Mike and Mike on ESPN, but they were talking about you take 100-level college courses. They said the Bills were throwing 400-level college course type blitzes at Hodges all evening, and I'm not going to lie. I mean, they really were. I mean, almost the play calling that they had was spot on, and they executed just how they needed to. But this is the throw that this one gets picked off. It's returned for 49 yards, and the Steelers, you want to talk about some grown-ass men on defense.
Oh, yeah.
Frank Gore, who we gave a lot of credit to, going into this game. Frank Gore is poised here. They run out the clock. They go into the fourth quarter. They flip sides, so now they're not in the open end. And Hauschka didn't have to kick into the open end, I don't think, on the evening. And so that was an advantage for them. I think that's the reason why they did it. They ran the two plays in order to chew up some clock. It was 3rd and 2. They pick up a first down on a very good tackle by Minkah Fitzpatrick here. It gets measured. You get the nose of the ball. It's a first down, and it's 1st and 8 from the Steelers' 8. It seems like, this is going to be really bad. You're clinging on, to this 3-point lead here, 10-7. And then all of a sudden, Joe Hayden gets a shoestring tackle. They lose 2 yards. Frank Gore walks in if Joe Hayden doesn't make this tackle.
Oh, yeah.
He makes the tackle behind the line. TJ Watt and Vince Williams close up a hole in a gap. I mean, they just stuff this offensive line. Frank Gore loses 5 yards. Devin Singletary comes in and the Bills are the exact opposite here. This is what we wanted the Steelers to do. This was run, 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 so we at least kick the field goal and tie the game, right? And he loses 3 yards as well. They lose a total of 10 yards on 3 plays. The defense stands up. This was officially 7 plays of offense for a net of 0 yards.
You don't see that line very often.
Man, was that amazing or what? And I mean, I had to bring that up because even though there was the pick, the worst that this does now, if you don't throw that pick and you don't have the Wildcat play, you're looking at a swing of points here where Buffalo, this may have been closer to the 1.5 line that the bookies were given on it. So, I mean, it's tough. I think we also have to put out here too. Right after this, it's 10-10. The Steelers they start to get moving a little bit. James Conner had a pass that was caught and they lost 7 yards. Just a terrible play. And I think this kind of alludes to what Hodges was doing and what you're talking about with the interceptions that he threw. He was almost trying to force it. He was trying to make the big plays happen, and it just wasn't clicking. He had been risky. He had been playing with his moxie. I like the aggressiveness. It was something where, Mason had been holding on to the ball too much, and I think this is the reason why you still stick with Duck Hodges as your quarterback, because I think he still gives you the opportunity to win, even though it doesn't go in your favor these times. This is where it didn't go in their favor. 4th and 3, they're at their 32, punt formation, and the long snapper candidate is called for a false start. Brian, what'd you see on TV, buddy? Because it sure didn't look like that was on candidate. It sure looked like whoever was a defensive tackle or whatever on the special teams for Buffalo got into the neutral zone, and it should have been a first down on a 5-yard penalty going the other way.
This is what I'm going to say about that. First of all, I almost had to change my GIF from the refs stink to the refs are smoking crack. Because, look, they called candidate because he raised his head. Something he does on absolutely every single play that is a punt or a kick. He raises his head. Why? Because he's got to see what the hell's going on. And they do it all the time, and then they go back down and they snap the ball. And some overzealous guy on the side of the Bills decided to jump because of it. But Tony Corrente, in his infinite stupidity, decided that's going to be on you. You can't move your head. That's just terrible. Well, you know what? Bleep you. That's ridiculous. It was the most absurd thing. And this is a season where I've seen some freaking absurd things. That was absurd. It was a ridiculous call. And, look, they stink. They stink. They stink.
Well, we didn't expect anything different, though, with Tony Corrente and his crew.
True.
Now, as you get further into this game, this flips it, because now Buffalo, it goes to 4th and 8, and, they get the ball on their 30. And now you get a defensive. You get a big gain on Steven Nelson, and he was all over John Brown, and he ended up catching the ball anyways. And now they're marching down the field, and this is a one here where Singletary nearly coughs it up once again, and it's actually recovered. John Brown ends up diving on the grenade, and the Bills avoid disaster there. And they end up with the Tyler Kroft TD, of which we were trying to figure out, is Mark Barron just like covering empty space, or was it on Terrell Edmonds? I know a lot of people see it as Edmonds. I don't even think even the replay that I know I saw in the stadium really showed Barron, but you have to understand where Barron was. I know he thought he had Edmonds as a safety help, but Edmonds is kind of covering a larger territory to either side. Barron already passed off whoever else came through on the first player. Now he's waiting and he's seeing there's a second guy, which is Croft, and he just passes him through again too. And I don't know if he was like kind of maybe spying to see if Allen was going to run out of the backfield, on a delay or anything like that. But it was kind of a mess of probably a miscommunication between either one or both of them, between Mark Barron and Terrell Edmonds, that lead, and an excellent play call, because what are you trying to do as on offense? I mean, you know where you're going. Hey, maybe we can get these guys to kind of miscommunicate and get, a one-on-one chance with our tight end, and they execute and they score. It's a good play. And as a defense, you're trying to guess what they're doing, and that's what they're trying to guess. Is Allen going to hold on to the ball, or what's going on here? Where's it going? It's not like Tyler Croft or any of their tight ends were really utilized a lot headed into this, but that's where Buffalo goes up. And then you have, to finish out the game, you have Hodges trying to heave a few balls up, and they're picked off in the end zone. But I will say, well, go ahead, Brian. I think you had something to say about that.
Yeah. Look, this is where once that touchdown occurs, right? Once they get in, and whether or not Barron is passing off the guy, whether he thinks, okay, you traveled through my zone, I'm done with you, or not, there clearly was an error in judgment somewhere along there. Whether Edmonds is playing out of position or in position or whatever the coverage is, it's very difficult to tell those things on TV. Even with the replay certainly makes it look like Mark Barron is passing a guy off, assuming that Edmonds is there to cover, but that doesn't mean he's right. So it's hard to say, is that on Barron? Is that on Edmonds? And with any real certainty, because we don't know what the play call was on the defensive side of the ball to begin with, and we don't know where the responsibilities lie. If, as you said, he'd already passed off another receiver, it sort of starts to make you wonder, because, how much help do you think you got? And then it becomes a little less questionable, and you could maybe push this on Barron more so than Edmonds. I don't know. But yeah, once that happened, this is what I sensed. To me, the Steelers sort of panicked.
Yes.
A little bit. And the reason I say that is, look, nothing had been working. They're playing against a very elite team. They had one good quality drive, and they're running out of time. At the point of that touchdown, what did they have? It's 7 minutes left?
Almost 8. 7:55. They run the first play at 7:50.
So, you've got a limited time frame, and you're trying to at least get the game tied up. Do I think that was an overreaction? Sure, I do. And they clearly went nowhere. 3 plays for -6 yards on the next drive, punted. The defense stands up, gets them the ball back. They go, 21 yards on 6 plays, get to the Buffalo 43, and then the first pick occurs. Again, at that point, you're down to about 5 something left to play. 3 minutes, I think, by the time the pick gets thrown. Or something along those lines. I don't know, but
your panic is they went 3 and out on that very next play. They didn't answer. It was 3 short, incomplete passes. They got absolutely 0 out of, and the one was Hodges just throwing it away because Micah Hyde came in like a bat out of hell.
Yeah, and they just. It got worse where they were like, we just got to throw. We got to get down there. We got to throw. And that's what they did. And once you become one-dimensional like that with a guy who is not, a elite talent quarterback, and I don't mean to be mean to Duck, but he's not, at least not in this point in his career. You're playing with fire, as we've seen many times before. He throws the one pass is on a line, so James Washington really has no chance at trying to come back and battle for that ball. It needed to be higher. Wasn't a great throw. The last one, whatever. You're just hoping and praying on that last heave with almost no time left. But that's the sense I got, is they panicked. And they didn't need to. That's the real big point of all this. They just didn't need to. Take the small bits. And that's, again, this goes back to our point about the game is different, and why I keep the turning point where I have it. The game is different if, you've kicked field goals a couple times. Now maybe you don't need 7.
Exactly.
I mean, I get it. If that's the only field goal they got, then it would have been, they still come up 1 point short. But, it's still different because if you can get the field goal and then get a 3 and out and get another field goal, guess what? That adds up to more.
Well, yeah, it ends up being maybe 19-17 because you got your deep passes a little crossed, but they put together, I don't know how many plays here, probably about 8-9 plays right up to the 2-minute warning. They got the ball with like 5:13 left. So they did. So after the aforementioned 3 and out, they forced a 3 and out with Buffalo. They start with really bad field position at their own 19. But this is where, you had the 3rd and 1. He finds James Washington for 32 yards. Tomlin was probably, they're playing with house money there. He's probably thinking, I'm going to go on a big play here, and then we're still going to go for it based on the field position in 3rd and 1. Time left, the whole situation with the game, the score and whatnot. And then, then it falls apart right here. You have a delay of game right after that. That takes you to 1st and 15. Then there's an incomplete pass of which Tevin Jones should have caught the ball. It was right there for him. You got to make that catch. And then I'm not going to say it's the best thrown ball, but this is the NFL. You got to catch the ball, okay? And then Hodges is sacked. And then Hodges finds Nick Vannett, who does his best Vance McDonald impression that he can. But if you don't lose either on the sack or the delay of game, those 5 yards, you're now in a 4th and 2 instead of a 4th and 7, or perhaps even a 1st down. It changes a lot of things. Hodges thought he saw Deion Kane in the back of the end zone, but he was basically double covered. That's the Jordan Poyer interception, and you think the game's over because there's 1:54 left. The Steelers use 2 of their timeouts, and then all of a sudden Buffalo shoots themselves in the foot. Quentin Spain gets called on a hold on 3rd down, stops the clock, and Buffalo's punting with 1:40 left. The Steelers get the ball back with 1:31, and they get the ball at their 43 because of a punt that wasn't so hot, and then takes the Steelers bounce towards the middle of the field, toward the logo. So now, let me ask you this, because it looked like this from the stands. I know some people were complaining that the refs stink on, was James Conner's face mask legit, or was it a little bit of theater there?
No, that was a baloney call. There was no face mask. There wasn't even anything close to a face mask. On the first face mask call, his head was flipped around on a later one that I think was legit. But early on, there was a face mask call that was total baloney.
Oh, okay. So the one that's on like the drive where they just get the ball back, the final drive of the game that they had, that one was legit then. Okay.
I can't remember for sure because I could be wrong.
Okay.
I haven't had a lot of sleep. All I know is they totally they totally blew one.
Yeah.
Where I have no idea what they saw. Again, this goes back to they're on crack because he was hallucinating.
Yeah, well, we know who it is. He suggests he caught it, referee. But, Devlin Hodges, for as much as you're saying he's going to panic and he's rattled, the pass that he makes to Deontay Johnson right at, that was near the end of the game here, 3rd and 7 was clutch. This is Ben to AB level stuff. And he gets out of bounds. There's still 39 seconds left. 1st and 10 from Buffalo's 26, and it's like, even if you heard the radio broadcast, Hunch says, I don't know, Billy, this is getting interesting now. And then Duck is sacked. They lose 8 yards. They rush up, try and do something. There's 15 seconds left on the clock. This is panic. This is a throw for James Washington, where James Washington, you usually get up. But, I mean, the ball was not put in the best spot for him to make a play.
That's the one. Yep.
And, I mean, even if it really – if it is, does he necessarily going to get – he maybe stopped short and the clock runs out. You don't know. They don't have any timeouts either. So, and that's the way the game ends. And, I mean, these are the things, though, that I don't think they're going to change what they're doing. Duck would have to have a pretty bad game, or they're in a must-win situation with the New York Jets. We could agree with that. They have to go at least 1-1 to have a chance. Tennessee, they have to lose one of their 2 games that are coming up with the Bucs and the Texans. And, the Texans did do a favor with them, but I think it's still the Steelers are on the inside there. Or if, they lose both and the Colts win three in a row, which I don't see necessarily happening either. then they're in. But they control their own destiny because they have to at least beat the Jets at the very least. Helps if they beat the Ravens, and depending on what goes on this upcoming weekend, the Ravens may be sitting in the 1 seed and they may not put their star players at risk. That may give the Steelers an opportunity to win that game in Baltimore and definitely secure a playoff spot. It would have been easier if they could have beat Buffalo, no doubt about it. But you're looking at this, and Duck is going to be the starter. There's no mistake about it. But don't be surprised if Tomlin, I don't know, man, if Duck goes out there and throws 2 picks and they're thinking he's not necessarily getting the job done, he could pull the trigger again. I mean, he's probably in the position where the Jets game is a must-win, and we're not going to say it's necessarily a gimme either, although the Jets defense is nowhere near the same level of defense as the Buffalo Bills. Bills defense might be the best they played all year, other than maybe the 49ers as well. And, the Jets aren't up to there, but it's Greg Williams. It's a coordinator that's familiar with the Steelers, so you're not throwing anything at him that, he hasn't necessarily seen anymore, so they'll be prepared. I think Le'Veon Bell will probably have a little, itch to try and have a revenge game, and we'll talk about those storylines going forward, but just from a postseason perspective, and your opportunity to win, they're going to go with Duck. There's going to be some rumblings about Mason or whatever if Duck doesn't do so hot at the beginning. I don't know what Mike Tomlin does there, but Duck is definitely the guy. I don't think they're moving off of that. The other flip side of this is, and the reason why I'm not necessarily super incredibly, distraught over this, it's like, okay, I understand the circumstances. You're still playing with, a bunch of guys that necessarily you have no business being where you are, and you're in this position as the Steelers, and you lose to a playoff team like the Bills. The Bills are a game out from the Patriots, and if they beat the Patriots, they have an opportunity to outright win the AFC East. Now, I got to see what the tiebreakers and things like that are, but if the Bills were to win the AFC East, that puts New England in a position that they're not usually in. They will not have a bye, and they'll have to go on the road in Wild Card Weekend, and they'll be the 5 seed, and the Steelers would be the 6 seed. That would actually mean, based on the way things are right now, Brian, that the Steelers would hit a revenge game against Buffalo, and I think that's a team that they could beat, provided they don't turn the ball over 5 times. It's going to be an interesting weekend that's coming up with football, especially Buffalo is on a short week, though. They do play the Saturday game, I believe. Yeah, they do play a Saturday game. I'll be excited to see the Ravens hand the Browns another losing season, and I as much as it's going to turn my stomach and make me want to throw up, I will cheer for the Ravens in that game simply so that they have locked up the number 1 seed. Because they win that game, they're the number 1 seed. Absolutely.
And there would be absolutely no reason for them to play any number of starters against the Steelers in that final game. But as you said, look, the easiest path for the Steelers right now is win out. They win the last 2 games they're in. They win the game against the Jets or the game against the Ravens, and the Titans lose again to the Texans, they're in. Then they're still in. Then there's some weird. The other thing you're talking about, 3 Colts wins. That's another weird.
That's just a weird scenario. It's even worse than the Browns not being already eliminated from this whole equation.
Yeah. They should be eliminated, or the Raiders both should be eliminated, but they're technically not. Look, the key is win out, and you don't have to worry about anybody else. If you lose one of these 2 games, then you better hope the Titans lose to the Texans, because that's your only prayer at that point, in my view. And it doesn't matter whether they lose to the Saints or not. They have to lose to the Texans. And I think that's a conference record or something like that has to go that way.
Yeah, we were looking at that, and I think the Steelers can get to 8 wins in the AFC with a win over either the Ravens or the Jets, and I mean that's going to put them in a good position with the Titans. If the Titans were to end up beating the Texans in the final week, then they're tied there, and then you got to go to some different tiebreakers where things could get real iffy. But absolutely, I mean we said this last week, and I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but we said they can't go 0-3 over these games. So this Jets game is the one that seems like the most likely path, and I mean it's the one that's the most immediate. So they got to go on the road for 2 games, but this most immediate task is you can't think of, well, you just walk in and play down to your opponent. Hopefully they're prepared for the Jets. The Jets do some funky, weird things, so there's, you never know what's going to end up happening there. But I still think, they're in the 6th seed. Buffalo's looking there at the reason I'm saying this is because we went last week and said, are they a Super Bowl contender? If you had, now that we know the result of the game that happened last night, Buffalo's in a position to really upend all of this. And then you want to talk about the Buffalo fans coming down to Pittsburgh. I think the Pittsburgh fans would go right back up to Buffalo, and you're going to –
oh, yeah.
It's going to be a really – we're talking about what, like a 2-3 week span here where they get to see this team again. And now maybe Duck Hodges isn't seeing ghosts the second time. He's already used to the cold weather, unless it's like a tremendous amount of snow. That might still benefit the Steelers because maybe they're forced to run, which they didn't do. There's a whole lot of things that could go on here. Now, it's a lot of woulda, coulda, shoulda, blah, blah, blah. We're talking about a lot of hypothetical situations here, but that's just one that I'm kind of throwing out, on the table, that their path to maybe do something even into the postseason and beyond, it doesn't look so terrible, to be completely honest. And I would much rather savor a victory in the wild card over Buffalo than, say, oh, hey, I won on Sunday night or something like that. And the Steelers can still get to 10 wins, which is absolutely ridiculous too when you look at all the things that have gone on. So, it isn't over until the fat lady sings, and she's a jag too. So,
yeah.
We'll see what ends up happening.
Absolutely. Look, this is I will feel somewhat mollified about this loss if the Bills beat the Patriots. If the Bills can kick the Patriots into a wild card spot, I'm kind of okay with losing. Kind of. Not 100%. Not really.
You're never
kinda.
really good with it. But
no, I'm never really good with it, but I'm kind of good with it simply because, as you said, I like that matchup a little better. And it makes it harder on the Patriots, and screw them. So I kind of like that idea. I don't know whether that's going to happen or not. Who knows? The Patriots probably have somebody filming the Bills, and they just haven't gotten caught. Who knows?
Well, there was like an extra set of cameras. Usually, it's on the visitor side, the little thing. It's almost like a boogermobile, the cart with the 2-tier cameras. There was a second set of those last night, and I was joking with Zach. I'm like, hey, I haven't seen that before here. I know it's Sunday Night Football, but maybe that's the Patriots camera crew. Never know, man.
Yeah, you never know.
Never know. They had to put up that wall on the south side. Remember, they did that like 2 years ago because there was some drone flying around during practice. So stranger things have happened. I don't know, man. But you know what? Buffalo has to go on the road and win another tough one against New England. They have to win there. Yeah. And on a Saturday, and it's a 4:30 game, and that's all kind of goofy things going on there. New England has to actually make sure they come out of that too, because they're holding on by a thread, and Kansas City could overtake them for the 2nd seed easily. So that's where things get kind of, they can go from 2 to 5. And then, Houston's there with the 4 seed. So they're going to play the 5 seed, which is probably going to be New England or Buffalo for all intents and purposes. You could have the Patriots still somehow win a division and not be in the bye, but I don't see that occurring because their other game is against the Dolphins. So, okay. They played the Dolphins before, and they've lost to the Dolphins in the past, but they're playing at home. We'll talk about schedules, man. They get 2 home games to finish this out with the Bills and Dolphins. What crap. Bengals, Bills, and Dolphins. Who makes these schedules? But the schedule makers stink. We'll put that out there, too. I'm trying to think if there was anything else that we needed to cover. I don't know. We may have to repeat this a little louder for those in the back. Duck Hodges is the starter.
Almost certainly. It would shock me to no end if they made a change. And to be frank, they shouldn't. As bad as that game was, hopefully if you listened to the podcast, you understand that it's not all. It really wasn't as bad as we thought. It wasn't good, but it's not all on Duck. And Mason just has looked awful since coming back from the concussion. I don't think you go back to that well right now. Give Duck the chance and see what happens.
Yeah, guys are going to have bad games. Not like Ben hasn't thrown a bunch of picks in the past too, and things of that nature. So I'm wondering if people would be saying the same thing. On the flip side, everyone's saying to fire Randy Fichtner, and I'm like, well, does that mean we change the old hashtag fire Haley to hashtag hire Haley? You said no. You were like, don't be silly. And I'm like, well, yeah, they had success with Haley. I don't think they would have success with Haley with these young quarterbacks because I think his system would be so complicated. I don't think somebody like Duck just jumps into that. It took forever for Landry Jones to get grasp of it. Michael Vick never had grasp of it, et cetera, et cetera. So I am being totally facetious with that one. Don't kill me in the comments, but while you're at it, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And Brian, thank you once again for joining me today, even though you sounded like Eeyore.
I appreciate that, and thanks for noticing me.
Absolutely. So until next time, folks, my name's Joe. His name's Brian. We encourage everyone out there to be safe, be good, and I'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.